Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're plunging headfirst into the whirlwind life of Alexander the Great.
Quite the figure to tackle.
Definitely. Forget dry history lessons. We've sifted through, well, a mountain of ancient accounts and modern analysis.
Yes, tons of sources.
We want to bring you the most gripping and revealing aspects of his story and his world-altering conquests.
It truly is a story on an epic scale. We're not aiming for, a blow-by-blow chronology,
Right.
but rather to unpack the pivotal moments and the driving forces that forged this legendary figure and the enduring impact he had.
Okay, so let's set the stage. Alexander wasn't just born royal, he was practically born into mythology.
Pretty much.
His father, Philip II of Macedon, was a military powerhouse, and his mother, Olympias, a fiery princess from Epirus. Well, she believed her son was destined for greatness, even divine.
Absolutely. Through Philip, Alexander's ancestry traced back to Timanos, a descendant of Heracles. Yes, that Heracles.
Whoa.
And through Olympias, his lineage stretched to Neoptolemus, son of Achilles, the hero of the Iliad.
These weren't just impressive family trees, were they?
No, not at all. They were actively cultivated and really shaped Alexander's own self-image, his sense of what he was capable of.
And the stories around his birth were suitably dramatic, weren't they? Whispers of a child with a lion's heart destined to conquer Asia. It's the kind of grand entrance you'd expect for someone who basically redrew the map of the ancient world. What do you make the connection between these prophecies and his actual drive?
What's fascinating here is how these prophecies, whether genuinely believed or maybe later contrivances, really intertwined with Olympias' ambition and Alexander's own burgeoning sense of self.
Right.
They created this powerful narrative, a sense of inevitability that likely fueled his audacity and inspired those around him.
Yeah, you can see how.
I mean, consider how a young ruler, constantly reminded of such a glorious destiny, might approach challenges versus someone with a more, let's say, conventional upbringing.
Talk about pressure. So with this almost mythical weight of expectation, what was his actual early life and education like? It couldn't have been all just prophecies and legends, right?
Not entirely, though that backdrop was, well, undeniably influential. Olympias, as we said, nurtured his belief in his extraordinary destiny. Philip, while equally ambitious, was more of a military pragmatist. Their relationship had a bit of a competitive edge. Alexander was constantly seeking his father's approval.
And maybe even aiming to surpass him.
Exactly, that seems pretty clear.
And beyond the royal upbringing, he had a pretty intense early education, didn't he?
He did. His initial upbringing was entrusted to Lanique, the sister of Clitus the Black, who would later become, a key general.
Okay.
Then he had tutors like Leonidas, known for his strict discipline, and Lysimachus, who focused on physical and intellectual development, the traditional pursuits of Macedonian nobility. Reading, music, horsemanship, military training.
But then Aristotle entered the picture. That must have been a real turning point in shaping his mind.
Oh, it was transformative. From about 342 to 340 BCE, Aristotle tutored Alexander in a secluded setting near Pella, part of a political agreement with Philip.
Right.
Aristotle immersed him in rhetoric, literature, science, medicine, philosophy. And critically, Aristotle gifted Alexander an annotated copy of the Iliad.
The Iliad.
Yeah, imagine this. Alexander carried this epic poem on campaign. He saw it as a strategic guide,
Like learning from Homer's accounts of inspiring troops, protecting soldiers.
exploiting enemy weaknesses. He actually called it the war doctrines of Homer.
Wow. So he was literally carrying around his battle plans disguised as ancient poetry. That's incredible.
Precisely. And it goes deeper. Aristotle also instilled in him this vision of a unified Greece, believing a singular, exceptional leader could achieve it. Now, Aristotle harbored strong anti-Persian sentiments, viewing them as, well, inherently inferior.
Which Alexander didn't fully adopt later.
Right. His approach to the conquered Persians would be more nuanced. Importantly, Aristotle also emphasized philia, the concept of deep friendship,
Ah, yes, Philia.
a cornerstone of Macedonian society that forged these really powerful bonds between Alexander and his heteroi, his close companions, and elite cavalry.
So this rigorous education under Aristotle wasn't just academic. It forged his intellectual and military framework, really setting the stage for his future.
Absolutely. By 16, his formal education with Aristotle concluded, and he returned to Pella to learn the practicalities of kingship from his father.
And he didn't have much time to ease into it, did he? He was thrown into a position of responsibility pretty quickly.
Indeed. In 340 BCE, Philip was off campaigning against Byzantium, and the 16-year-old Alexander was appointed regent.
16. even with experienced advisors like Antipater around.
Yep. And during this time, the Mede tribe in Thrace revolted. Alexander responded decisively, led his first military campaign, drove out the Mede.
And even founded a city, Alexandropolis, settling it with Greeks.
He did, and seized the opportunity to recruit the Agrianes, those renowned javelin throwers, into his army. A remarkable display of initiative for such a young leader.
That's seriously impressive for a teenager. It's clear early on he had that ambition and leadership drive.
It does seem that way. When Philip returned, he tasked Alexander with further quelling unrest in southern Thrace. During the siege of Perinthos, Alexander even reportedly saved his father's life.
Wow.
But tensions between them flared again, particularly concerning Philip's marriages and potential new heirs.
The succession issue.
Right. It led to a temporary estrangement between Alexander and Olympias and Philip. Yet Philip, recognizing his son's abilities, eventually reconciled with him.
Then, in 336 BCE, Philip II was assassinated, a real seismic shift. How did Alexander manage to step into that power vacuum so swiftly?
Philip's assassination at his daughter's wedding was, a moment of immense instability. The assassin's motives are still debated. Personal grievance seems most likely.
But there were rumors.
Oh, immediately. Rumors swirled, even implicating Alexander or Olympias, though, solid evidence is lacking.
Right.
Regardless, Alexander, with the crucial support of the Macedonian army and key figures, acted decisively. He inherited not only the Macedonian throne, but also Philip's powerful positions as permanent regent of Thessaly and hegemon of the Hellenic League.
Essentially the leader of the allied Greek states.
Pretty much.
But his ascension wasn't universally welcomed, was it? There were immediate rumblings of discontent.
Absolutely. Several Greek city-states, Athens and Thebes included, saw Philip's death as an opportunity to break free from Macedonian dominance.
Makes sense.
Alexander's advisors actually cautioned him to solidify his authority in Macedonia first, before thinking about Persia.
But that wasn't his style.
No. Alexander was determined to uphold his father's vision and maintain those alliances. He immediately dispatched envoys to Greece to prevent the Hellenic League from dissolving.
And Thebes.
Thebes was most vocal in opposition, but they quickly submitted when Alexander just showed up at their gates with his army.
That'll do it.
Then at the Isthmus of Corinth, Athens and the rest of the Hellenic League, except Sparta, notably recognized him as hegemon for the impending campaign against Persia.
So he secured his Greek allies, but then had to deal with threats on his northern border before he could even think about looking east, right?
Precisely. Before launching his Asian campaign, Alexander undertook two crucial military expeditions up north.
Securing the home front first.
Exactly. One against the tribes along the Danube River, just showing his reach to deterring incursions. The other was against rebellion in Illyria.
So consolidating control.
These swift, successful campaigns showcased his military prowess and ensured a relatively secure base for his ambitious eastward plans.
Then came the real test. The Greek city-states revolting again while he was campaigning in the north. That must have felt like a serious betrayal.
It was a direct challenge, yeah. Fueled by Persian funds and diplomatic efforts from Darius III, specifically through Memnon of Rhodes.
Memnon again.
Memnon had been actively regaining ground in Asia Minor and stirring up anti-Macedonian sentiment. Then rumors of Alexander's death up near the Danube ignited the revolt.
And Thebes was right back at it.
Thebes was at the forefront, yeah. Emboldened by promises of support from Athens and Sparta, though that support never really materialized. While other cities hesitated, Thebes acted decisively.
And Alexander's response to Thebes was, well, let's just say it was a demonstration of overwhelming power.
It was a brutal and decisive statement. As soon as he heard, Alexander marched his army south with incredible speed.
Like astonishing speed, right?
Astonishing. Hundreds of kilometers in just days. He appeared unexpectedly before Thebes, which was besieging the Macedonian garrison there.
And despite resistance.
Despite fierce resistance, Thebes fell. And following the dictates of the Hellenic League, many of whom were old rivals of Thebes anyway,
Right.
the decision was made to completely destroy the city as a warning.
Total destruction.
Almost. Only the temples, the citadel, and the house of the poet Pindar were spared. Pindar had historical ties to the Macedonian royals.
And the people.
Horrific consequences. The land was divided up, and over 30,000 citizens were sold into slavery.
Wow. That sent a clear, albeit terrifying message. The other Greek city-states must have been reeling.
It did. It effectively crushed any further widespread resistance in Greece. Only Sparta remained openly defiant, but without allies, they weren't an immediate threat.
Did he ever regret it?
It said he did. later regretted the severity and apparently tried to appease Dionysus, Thebes' patron god, and he reportedly treated surviving Thebans he met later with some consideration.
So, with Greece firmly under his control, Alexander finally turned his attention eastward. This grand campaign was framed as fulfilling Philip II's Pan-Hellenic project against Persia.
But with Alexander firmly in command, of course.
Right. What were the real underlying goals?
Well, that's the official narrative. Philip had certainly laid the groundwork, partly responding to Persian interference in Greece. But Philip's aims were likely more limited. Maybe just securing the Aegean coast, not conquering the whole Persian Empire. Some Greeks even hoped the war would weaken Macedon.
But Alexander had bigger ideas.
It definitely seems Alexander had a far grander vision from the outset.
And the army that crossed the Hellespont wasn't the overwhelming force one might imagine for such an ambitious undertaking, was it?
No, it's relatively modest. Around 40,000 infantry, maybe 1,800 Macedonian cavalry, similar number of Thessalians, 600 other Greeks.
Plus troops from the north.
Yeah, significant numbers from Thrace and Paeonia, highly trained professional army, but not necessarily bigger than the Persian forces.
And the Persians had Greek mercenaries fighting for them too, right?
They did. A lot of them, maybe 50,000.
Yeah.
Alexander also wisely left Antipater in Macedon as regent with a sizable force to keep things stable back home.
Smart move.
And throughout the campaign, he got reinforcements from Europe, and he also started incorporating local soldiers, eventually even Persians, into his ranks.
The first major clash in Asia Minor was at the Granicus River. What made this battle so significant early on?
Well, Darius's Greek mercenary commander, Memnon of Rhodes, he actually advised a scorched earth policy.
Starve Alexander out.
Yeah, starve his army, force a retreat, while the Persian navy attacked Macedon. Sound strategy.
But the satraps didn't listen.
No, they distrusted Memnon. The satrap of Phrygia, Arsites, refused any destruction in his territory, so Alexander advanced toward the Persians at the Granicus.
And the battle itself.
The Persians held a strong position on the riverbank. Difficult terrain, deep river, steep, muddy banks. But Alexander, with characteristic boldness,
led the charge himself.
Personally led a daring assault across the river with his companion cavalry under heavy arrow fire. He was nearly killed.
Famously saved by Cletus the Black.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The Macedonian phalanx followed, and the Persian forces were just routed. Heavy losses for them, relatively minor for Alexander.
Huge victory.
Pivotal. It shattered Persian authority in Asia Minor and opened the door for his advance along the Aegean coast.
And this victory did indeed lead to the surrender or capture of key Aegean coastal cities. It wasn't always a straightforward welcome, though, was it?
No. The victory weakened Persian garrisons, made cities rethink things. Sardis, the capital of Phrygia, surrendered without a fight. Parmenians secured Dicilion.
What about Ephesus?
Ephesus had internal struggles, so they welcomed Alexander. He shrewdly used their former tribute money for the Temple of Artemis and let exiles return. Good PR.
Boosting his image as a liberator.
Exactly. But there was resistance. Enemies, including Memnon, holed up in Miletus, which Alexander besieged and captured. Memnon then fell back to Halicarnassus,
which became a major resistance point.
Yeah, heavily fortified, supported by the satrap Orontabes and a Theban exile, Ephialtes, who had a grudge against Alexander.
Interesting twist with Ada, the ousted queen.
Right. Halicarnassus also had a faction supporting Ada. Alexander strategically appointed her satrap after taking the city, securing a valuable ally.
But Halicarnassus itself was tough.
Very. Formidable defenses. A citadel on an island offshore. Alexander breached the outer walls, but decided to bypass the citadel and move east, leaving a force to continue the siege.
So while securing the crucial coastline, he also had to venture inland into regions like Pamphylia and Pisidia. Were these areas as firmly under Persian control?
Not really. Pamphylia and Pisidia were largely autonomous regions, nominally Persian, but most cities were fiercely independent, often fighting each other.
So Alexander played diplomat.
He skillfully navigated these complex local dynamics, exploited rivalries, secured submission from cities like Aspendos and Side, often without force.
Then into Phrygia.
Moved into Phrygia, aiming for Gordian, strategically vital, central location, major trade junction. He left Antigonus Monophthalmus to take Kilani, the capital.
Why was Phrygia so crucial?
Control of Phrygia was key for his supply lines and communications. He then went into rugged Pisidia, showed restraint at Termessus, treated Selj well, before reaching Gordian on the royal road.
And got reinforcements there.
Yeah, much-needed reinforcements from Greece and Macedon, plus Parmenians' forces. He appointed Nearchus satrap of Pamphylia and Pisidia, Antigonus took Phrygia, establishing a more permanent Macedonian presence.
While Alexander was steadily pushing eastward, the Persians weren't just passively watching, were they? Memnon's growing naval power in his rear must have presented a real threat.
It was a significant and growing concern, yeah. In winter 334 BCE, Darius finally recognized Memnon's skill and made him admiral.
And his plan.
Shift the war to Greece itself. Land forces on Euboea incite a big anti-Macedonian revolt.
Which could have worked.
Potentially. Anti-Macedonian feeling was still strong in many cities. A Persian counteroffensive, maybe with Greek allies, was a serious danger to Alexander's whole campaign.
Did Memnon have successes?
He did. Captured Chios, reinstated oligarchs there, besieged Mytilene on Lesbos. If he'd gained control of the Aegean, Alexander's supply lines, well, they'd have been in big trouble.
This naval activity must have driven home the crucial importance of Alexander gaining control of the seas himself.
Absolutely. Alexander realized disbanding his own small fleet had been a mistake. He urgently needed to reestablish Macedonian naval power.
To control the straits, protect islands,
and directly counter the Persian fleet in his rear. He ordered the Hellenic League members to assemble ships, appointed Hegelochus and Amphiterus as admirals.
Dividing tasks?
Hegelochus to reinforce Lesbos, Chios, Cotys, Amphiterus to command the Hellespont fleet. There was even a near clash with the returning Athenian fleet.
Highlighting the tension back in Greece.
Exactly. Underscored the urgency for a decisive land victory. So when news came that Darius was advancing into Cilicia in early summer 333 BCE,
Alexander marched immediately.
Broke camp in Gordian, marched south to confront him. He knew a major land victory was the best way to neutralize that naval threat.
And that decision led directly to the pivotal Battle of Issus. What was the strategic setup and the ultimate outcome of that crucial clash?
Well, after Gordian, Alexander went to Ancyra. Paphlagonia and Cappadocia submitted, though he didn't linger. Then south into Cilicia through the Cilician gates, not much resistance.
But then he got sick.
Yeah, reached Soles and fell seriously ill. Probably a chill after swimming in the cold Cydnus River. While he was sick, Parmenion secured passes towards Aetius and Syria.
Once recovered,
Alexander subdued Cilician highlanders, captured Soles, reinstated democracy, got indemnity money. He also got updates, Ptolemy doing well in Caryub, but also Pharnabazus having naval successes and allying with King Aegeus of Sparta.
More trouble brewing in Greece.
Exactly. Further emphasized the precarious situation back home. So the stage was set for the confrontation with Darius.
And the battle itself, Issus.
It unfolded on this narrow coastal plain near the Panaris River. The terrain actually negated Darius's numerical advantage, especially his cavalry.
And Alexander.
He personally led a decisive charge with his elite companion cavalry, smashed the Persian left flank, went straight for Darius.
And Darius fled.
For the second time, yes. Fled the battlefield, the Persian army just disintegrated. Darius's family, mother, wife, children were captured.
Huge victory.
Comprehensive. Though Alexander chose not to immediately pursue Darius, which some advisors questioned.
Capturing Darius's family must have provided Alexander with a significant diplomatic advantage, but instead of immediately negotiating peace, he turned his attention south to secure the Phoenician coast. What was the strategic rationale behind that move?
Well, yeah, capturing the family gave him leverage, but his immediate primary goal was dismantling the Persian naval power that still threatened his rear in Greece.
And the Phoenician coast was key to that.
It was the heartland of the Persian fleet, provided the ships, the sailors. By controlling those port cities, Alexander could effectively neutralize the Persian navy, treaty or no treaty.
So it was about sea power.
Absolutely. Prioritizing Phoenicia over chasing Darius, despite Parmenion's advice, shows his sharp long-term strategic thinking. He understood sea power was crucial.
And this strategic decision led to the famous and often brutal sieges of the Phoenician cities. Sidon surrendered relatively easily, but Tyre presented a far more formidable challenge, didn't it?
Sidon gave up readily, yeah. They remembered Artaxerxes II's harshness after a previous revolt. Other cities like Arados and Byblos followed quickly.
But Tyre resisted.
Tyre, under King Asimilkos, declared neutrality but refused Alexander's demand to enter the city and sacrifice at the temple of Heracles Melkart.
They knew it wasn't just about religion.
Exactly. They knew it was a strategic move to control their vital port. Tyre was on an island about a kilometer offshore, 2 well-protected harbors.
And Alexander didn't have much of a navy then.
Not yet. So he made the audacious decision to build a mole, a land bridge, out to the island city.
Which must have been incredibly difficult.
Monumental undertaking. Hampered by deeper water near the island, constant Tyrian counterattacks, shifts, fire ships, even diverse sabotaging the work.
But then things change.
Dramatically. When the other Phoenician cities surrendered, their ships became his ships.
Ah, so he got a fleet after all.
A substantial fleet. He could blockade Tyre by sea. After a grueling 7-month siege, intense fighting, innovative siege weapons, Tyrian naval sorties, he finally breached the walls in August 332 BCE.
And the conquest.
Brutal. Thousands of defenders and civilians killed, many more enslaved.
After the fall of Tyre, Alexander continued south into Egypt, where he was welcomed almost as a liberator. That must have been a welcome respite after the intense siege of Tyre.
It was a stark and welcome contrast, absolutely. Egypt had a long history of resisting Persian rule, periods of brutal suppression.
They were happy to see him.
When Alexander arrived in 331 BCE, the Persian satrap Mazaces just surrendered Egypt and his treasury without a fight. Maybe he saw the writing on the wall or sensed the anti-Persian mood.
And Alexander embraced Egyptian customs.
In Memphis, he was formally crowned pharaoh, showed respect for their gods. Then he strategically chose a site in the Nile Delta.
For Alexandria.
Exactly. Founded Alexandria, destined to become this major center of trade, culture, Hellenistic influence.
And the pilgrimage to Siwa.
A significant move. He went to the remote oracle of Amun at the Siwa oasis. There, the priests recognized him as the son of Zeus-Ammon.
Which fit Egyptian tradition, but was also great propaganda.
Exactly. Reinforced his image of divine favor and destiny.
This divine endorsement must have further solidified his sense of purpose. From Egypt, he then turned his sights eastward once more for the decisive showdown with Darius at Gaugamela.
Yes. Leaving Egypt in spring 331 BCE, he marched towards Assyria, crossed the Euphrates and Tigris. His scouts found Darius's massive army on the wide, open plain of Gaugamela.
Darius chose that spot deliberately, right?
Deliberately. To use his superior numbers, especially cavalry and scythed chariots, hoping to outflank and overwhelm the Macedonians.
But Alexander had a plan.
Anticipating this, he deployed his army in that innovative oblique order, concentrating his best troops on the right flank, expecting the envelopment.
And it worked.
The battle was fierce. But Alexander's tactical brilliance, his personal courage leading from the front, and the discipline of his troops won out again.
He went straight for Darius.
Launched a direct, daring assault on Darius's position. Darius panicked and fled the field.
Yet again.
The Persian army saw him flee, broke ranks. Alexander secured a crushing, decisive victory that effectively shattered the Achaemenid Empire's military power.
With Darius on the run, Alexander triumphantly entered Babylon and Susa, seizing their immense royal treasuries. But even amidst these grand victories, there were still challenges back in Greece, weren't there?
Indeed, 331 BCE was a year of triumph and challenge. While he was winning in the east, Antipater, his regent back home, faced a serious threat.
From Sparta.
Yeah, King Aegeus III of Sparta, still resisting Macedonian dominance, he allied with Cretan pirates and some Peloponnesian states, launched a revolt.
Did he have much support?
Only Megalopolis and Messene, the Peloponnese, refused to join him. So Macedon still had influence. Aegeus had some early success, beat a Macedonian force, besieged Megalopolis.
But the rest of Greece stayed out.
Largely passive. Even Demosthenes in Athens advised against getting involved. And Alexander's diplomatic gestures, like returning statues to Athens, helped maintain some goodwill.
So Antipater handled it.
Antipater, a seasoned general himself, led a large army south and decisively defeated Aegeus at the Battle of Megalopolis in autumn 331 BCE. Aegeus died in battle.
The last major Greek resistance.
Pretty much. Interestingly, when news reached Alexander, he reportedly wasn't that impressed. Saw it as minor compared to his own victories.
Typical. So, with Greece pacified once more, Alexander pressed on in his pursuit of Darius. This eventually led him to Persepolis, another major Persian capital, which tragically met a fiery end. What exactly transpired there?
Unlike Babylon and Susa, Persepolis was heavily plundered by the army, maybe because it was such a key ceremonial center for the Achaemenids. Alexander stayed there about 5 months.
And the fire.
A massive, devastating fire broke out in Xerxes Phares's palace and spread rapidly. The exact cause is debated.
Accident or deliberate?
Some accounts say a drunken accident. Others, like Plutarch and Diodorus, say it was deliberate, maybe instigated by the Athenian courtesan Thais at a banquet.
Revenge for Xerxes burning Athens.
That's one theory. Or maybe a symbolic message that the Hellenic League's goals were achieved. Interestingly, Alexander seems to have immediately regretted it.
Really?
Plutarch says he ordered men to put it out, but it was too late. Quintus Curtius Rufus claims he only realized the gravity the next morning. Regardless, it was a symbolic end to the Achaemenid dynasty.
And Darius himself. His end wasn't a glorious final stand on the battlefield, but rather a more tragic and somewhat ignominious affair.
Indeed. Darius fled east to Media, hoping to rally support from the eastern satrapies. Facing Alexander's relentless advance, he headed towards Hyrcania, near the Caspian Sea, with just a few loyalists and Greek mercenaries.
Alexander kept chasing.
Relentlessly. But Darius was ultimately betrayed and assassinated by his own satrap Bessus and other officials.
Hoping to curry favor with Alexander.
Likely. When Alexander finally reached Darius, the king was already dead. Alexander, very strategically, portrayed himself as Darius's rightful successor.
Expressed grief, vowed revenge.
Exactly, further solidifying his image as the legitimate ruler of the former Persian lands.
With Darius out of the picture, the conquest of Persia might seem complete. However, Alexander's ambition knew no bounds, and he continued his eastward campaigns into Central Asia and then India. These campaigns presented a whole new set of challenges, didn't they?
They certainly did. After Darius's death, he had to secure the remaining Persian satrapies and deal with resistance from settled people and nomadic tribes.
Like Spitamenes and Sogdiana.
A particularly formidable opponent. His rebellion was a major challenge. These regions were way less Hellenized, offered fierce, prolonged resistance.
So it was tough going.
Nearly 2 arduous years subduing Sogdiana and Bactria. Often brutal warfare, sieges. Spitamenes, who betrayed Bessus, turned on Alexander, inflicted significant losses.
And Alexander's response?
Ruthless, destroyed cities, massacred or enslaved populations to suppress the revolts. He even crossed the Jaxartes River, the northern edge of the Persian Empire, to face the Saka nomads, eventually reaching a non-aggression pact. Shows his adaptability.
It was during this period of intense campaigning in Central Asia that Alexander made the shocking decision to eliminate Philotas and Parmeninon, 2 of the most senior and influential figures in his army. These were drastic and brutal actions.
These were indeed pivotal and deeply controversial moments. They reveal a growing paranoia in Alexander's inner circle and a consolidation of his personal power.
Philotas first.
Philotas, son of the veteran General Parmenion, commander of the Companion Cavalry, accused of conspiracy to assassinate Alexander.
Was the evidence strong?
Arguably circumstantial, extracted under torture, but he was convicted and executed by the Army Assembly.
And Parmenion?
Alexander feared Parmenion, who commanded a large force and had huge influence, might seek revenge. So he made the even more ruthless decision
To have him killed.
Sent secret orders to Ecbatana for Parmenion's immediate assassination before he even heard about Philotas's execution.
Wow, that must have sent shockwaves.
It effectively eliminated potential opposition, but it also sowed fear and discontent among some remaining officers, really highlighted the increasingly autocratic nature of his rule.
The resistance in Bactria and Sogdiana, particularly led by Spitamenes, continued to be a major thorn in Alexander's side. It wasn't until he married Roxana, a local princess, that things began to stabilize somewhat in that volatile region.
Yeah, the resistance was tenacious. But Alexander's forces eventually defeated Spitamenes, who was then betrayed and killed by nomads trying to appease Alexander.
And the marriage to Roxana?
His marriage to Roxana, daughter of the Bactrian noble Oxyartes in 327 BCE, was a significant strategic move.
To consolidate control, foster relations.
Exactly. Integrate the Macedonians with the local elites. Helped bring some stability, though uprisings continued. He also founded numerous Alexandrias in the east, solidifying his presence, promoting Hellenistic culture.
But even within his most trusted circle, tensions were clearly simmering beneath the surface. The so-called Pages conspiracy and the subsequent death of Callisthenes underscore this growing friction.
Yeah, the Pages conspiracy in summer 327 BCE involved young royal attendants plotting assassination. Motivations were likely mixed personal grievances, resentment of his autocratic style, his adoption of Persian customs.
And the outcome?
Plot discovered, Pages brutally executed. Callisthenes, Aristotle's nephew and Alexander's official historian, had clashed with Alexander before.
Over divine honors and proskynesis.
Particularly proskynesis, that Persian custom of prostration. Many Greeks found it deeply unsettling, reserved for gods. Callisthenes vehemently opposed it.
Argued for the Greek distinction between mortal and divine.
Right. He was eventually imprisoned, likely for his criticism and suspected involvement in the conspiracy, and died shortly after.
Alienating many Greeks.
Definitely. It vividly shows the growing tension between Alexander's vision of this unified, divinely sanctioned empire and the traditional values of his Macedonian and Greek companions.
Then came the momentous Indian campaign. What were the driving forces behind Alexander's decision to venture so far east into a land largely unknown to the Greeks?
His motives were likely complex, multifaceted. He undoubtedly aimed to extend his empire to what he thought were the old Persian Empire's eastern boundaries under Darius the Great.
Geographical completion. Trade routes.
Both. Plus, he got an invitation from Taxiles, ruler of Taxila in the Punjab, who wanted help against his powerful neighbor, King Porus.
And beyond strategy.
The sheer allure of the unknown, maybe. Ambition to reach the mythical edge of the world. Perhaps even a growing belief in his own divine destiny, fueling that relentless eastward push. Some historians think he might have even dreamed of conquering the entire known world by then.
The conquest of the Punjab brought Alexander and his army face to face with formidable new adversaries, most notably King Porus and his impressive force of war elephants. The Battle of the Hydaspes River must have been an especially brutal and challenging encounter.
It was indeed a fiercely contested and costly victory. Even before Hydaspes, they faced tough resistance from the Isakanoi tribe.
And Porus's elephants.
That was the big challenge. The Macedonians hadn't faced war elephants on that scale before. They initially caused significant disruption.
But Alexander adapted.
Showed his tactical adaptability again. Devised clever countermeasures, opened ranks to let elephants pass through, targeted the mahouts, the riders, with javelins.
And the result.
Despite heavy losses and facing a formidable opponent in Porus, Alexander's superior cavalry and infantry tactics ultimately prevailed. Porus was wounded and captured.
But Alexander treated him well.
Impressed by Porus's bravery and kingly bearing, Alexander reinstated him as a satrap of his own kingdom, pragmatic governance. But the battle took a significant toll on the army casualties and morale.
And it was at the Hyphasis River, just a relatively short distance further east, that Alexander's long-suffering troops finally reached their breaking point and famously refused to go any further. That must have been a bitter blow to Alexander's seemingly unstoppable ambitions.
It was a pivotal and, yet, deeply frustrating moment for Alexander. After years of relentless campaigning, vast distances, constant hardships,
They were just exhausted.
physically and mentally exhausted.
Oh.
Ranks thinned by battle and disease. They finally mutinied at the Hyphasis River, refused to go further into the unknown.
Who spoke for them?
Coensus, a respected general, eloquently pleaded with Alexander to recognize their exhaustion, let them go home.
And Alexander?
After 3 days alone in his tent, wrestling with it, consulting officers, a deeply reluctant Alexander finally conceded.
But he left a mark.
To mark the easternmost point, and maybe as a symbol of his thwarted ambitions, he ordered the construction of 12 colossal altars to the Olympian gods.
A turning point.
Definitely. Starkly revealed the growing disconnect between his boundless personal ambition and the limits of his army's endurance and will.
So the dream of further eastern conquest ended there. The long and arduous journey back westward was fraught with its own dangers and difficulties, wasn't it?
The return journey proved incredibly challenging and costly, yes. Alexander ordered a large fleet built under Nucius to sail down the Indus and explore the coast.
While the army marched overland.
Mostly, yeah, in 2 main groups. They encountered hostile tribes along the Indus, fierce resistance from the Mali.
And Alexander was wounded. Seriously.
During the siege of a Mali town, in a moment of reckless bravery, he was severely wounded by an arrow through the lung. Came dangerously close to death.
Still, he set up infrastructure.
Despite the challenges, yeah. Oversaw establishing ports, infrastructure along the Indus for future trade and communication.
But the overland journey was brutal, especially the desert crossing.
The journey through the harsh Gedrosian desert, the Macrian desert, was particularly devastating. Enormous losses of soldiers and camp followers, extreme conditions, lack of water, supplies, disease, just awful.
Upon his return to the heart of his empire in Persia, Alexander was faced with the consequences of his prolonged absence and the significant changes that had occurred within his vast and rapidly expanding domain.
Yeah, back in Persia, he found many officials and satraps he'd appointed had become corrupt, abusing power, enriching themselves.
So what? Cleaned house.
Acted swiftly and decisively. Investigations, executions of several corrupt officials, a stern warning to restore order.
But he also faced problems with his own veterans, the Opus Mutiny.
A significant mutiny at Opus, yes. His battle-hardened Macedonian veterans deeply resented his increasing adoption of Persian customs, wearing Persian dress, integrating Persians into elite units.
They saw it as a betrayal.
A betrayal of their Macedonian identity and privileges.
Yeah.
Alexander skillfully navigated this volatile situation, reaffirmed his respect for them, their achievements, but also emphasized the need for unity in his diverse empire. Shrewdly announced plans to send elderly and disabled soldiers home to Macedon under Craterus.
Which addressed their grievances.
Helped quell the mutiny, yeah. Effective move.
Then, in 323 BCE, in Babylon, at the relatively young age of 32, Alexander the Great died. The circumstances surrounding his sudden death remain a subject of much historical debate and speculation.
The ancient accounts differ slightly. Plutarch says he fell ill after a long drinking session with Nearchus and Medius, developed a severe fever, worsened till he couldn't speak.
And Diodorus Siculus.
Diodorus claims he fell ill after drinking a large bowl of unmixed wine for Heracles, suffered intense pain for 11 days, but doesn't mention fever. Arrian mostly agrees with Diodorus. Plutarch dismisses Diodorus's account.
But poisoning was suspected.
Given the history of court intrigues and assassinations among Macedonians, many ancient sources, Diodorus, Plutarch, Arrian, Justinus, raise the possibility. Justinus flat out says it was a conspiracy.
Who was implicated?
Antipater is frequently mentioned. He'd just been replaced as regent, had a strained relationship with Olympias, maybe feared a summons to Babylon was a death sentence, remembering Parmenion and Philotas.
And his son.
His son Iollas, Alexander's cupbearer, is often named as the alleged poisoner. Some even speculate about Aristotle, given his ties to Antipater and unease with Alexander, but there's little real evidence.
So we don't really know for sure.
The precise cause remains one of history's enduring mysteries.
The immediate aftermath of his death was marked by chaos and uncertainty, as Alexander had failed to name a clear successor. His famous last words, "to the strongest," if he indeed uttered them, only fueled the ensuing power struggles.
Yeah, the lack of a clear heir plunged the empire into immediate turmoil. His wife Roxana was pregnant, gave birth to Alexander V after his death, complicating things further.
So, to the strongest, real or not?
According to Diodorus, when asked who gets the kingdom, he replied, "Toi kratostoi," to the strongest. Another theory, less credible, is they misheard "quai crateroi," meaning to Craterus, the general leading veterans home.
But maybe he couldn't even speak.
Arrian and Plutarch suggest he was unable to speak by then, casting doubt on the quote. A more plausible account, supported by Diodorus, Curtius Rufus, and Justinus, is that he gave his signet ring to Perdiccas, a trusted bodyguard.
Designating him successor.
Effectively. Perdiccas initially proposed Roxana's child, if male, should be king, with himself, Craterus, Leonatus, and Antipater as regents, but the infantry fiercely opposed that.
They wanted his half-brother.
Favored Alexander's mentally disabled half-brother Philip Aridaeus. Eventually a fragile compromise. Both Philip Aridaeus and the future Alexander IV proclaimed joint kings, though real power lay with the generals, the Diadochi.
And the immense empire he had forged with such speed and brilliance didn't remain unified for long, did it? It quickly fractured.
No. Despite his grand plans, more campaigns, huge building projects, integrating populations, his sudden death created a power vacuum his generals couldn't fill together.
What happened to his body?
Initially taken to Memphis by Ptolemy, later moved to Alexandria.
I had its plans.
His will, supposedly read by Perdiccas, outlined more expeditions, temples, cities, even population transfers, largely abandoned by his successors as impractical.
So the empire broke up.
Divided amongst the Diadochi, leading to decades of war and the emergence of the Hellenistic kingdoms. Seleucid Empire, Ptolemaic Egypt, Antigonid Macedonia, ruled by his former lieutenants.
Despite its eventual fragmentation, Alexander's impact on the ancient world is undeniable. His military genius alone secures his enduring place in the annals of history.
His military brilliance is truly exceptional. Undefeated, often against superior numbers. Remarkable tactical adaptability, masterful use of terrain, combining the phalanx and cavalry effectively.
Bold strategies, loyal troops.
Exactly. He adapted his army, constantly light infantry against flanking in Central Asia, new tactics against Porus's elephants, and his personal involvement leading from the front.
Inspired his soldiers.
A powerful inspiration, often decisive in battle.
Beyond his remarkable military achievements, what about Alexander's complex and often contradictory personality? What were the key factors that shaped him?
Well, definitely shaped by his parents. Olympias instilled that sense of destiny, almost divinity. Philip fostered the fierce competitiveness, desire for glory.
He always wanted to surpass his father.
constantly strived to equal and surpass him, sometimes even belittling Philip's achievements. He developed this deep belief in his own divine favor, fueled by Olympias and the Siwa oracle.
And the adoption of Persian customs, proskynesis.
Caused significant friction, resentment among Macedonians who saw it as un-Greek, sacrilegious. But Alexander was also pragmatic. He understood he needed to adapt to rule this diverse empire where divine kingship was normal.
He formed close bonds, too, right? Hephaestion.
Very close bonds, especially Hephaestion. His death devastated Alexander. His sexuality is debated. Some ancient sources hint at homosexual relationships, but definitive evidence is elusive.
So a complex mix.
Ambition, charisma, ruthlessness, and this profound belief in his own exceptional destiny. A real tapestry.
And his lasting legacy extends far beyond just his military victories and territorial conquest, doesn't it? His impact on the ancient world was truly transformative.
Indeed. His conquest led to a significant enduring expansion of Hellenic influence, eastward Hellenization.
Spreading Greek language, philosophy, art.
Language, philosophy, art, architecture, political ideas across vast territories led to this vibrant fusion of Greek and local cultures.
And the cities he founded?
Numerous cities, many named Alexandria, became vital centers of trade, learning, cultural exchange. Some still thrive today. He also patronized local temples, like at Priene, fostered some goodwill.
And his influence on later figures.
Rome profoundly influenced later figures and empires, especially Rome. Generals like Pompey and Caesar consciously emulated his strategies, sought his legendary status, and the Alexander romance.
Those fantastical stories.
Exactly, fictionalized accounts that spread everywhere, cementing his image as this larger-than-life hero and conqueror.
So as we conclude this deep dive into the extraordinary life of Alexander the Great, it's clear that he was a figure of immense complexity and contradictions, a brilliant military commander, a relentlessly ambitious ruler, and a man whose actions indelibly shaped the course of ancient history.
His conquests not only redrew the political map, but also initiated this profound era of cultural exchange between East and West, laying the groundwork for centuries of interaction, shaping so many civilizations.
And as you consider Alexander's remarkable story, we leave you with this final thought. What is it about this figure that continues to captivate our imaginations over 2 millennia later? Is it his unparalleled military achievements against seemingly insurmountable odds? Is it his boundless ambition and relentless pursuit of glory?
Or his personality?
His complex and often contradictory personality? Or is it the enduring power of the myths and legends that have grown around him? What aspects of his extraordinary life resonate most deeply with you, and what fundamental questions about this pivotal figure in history still remain unanswered in your mind?
Lots to think about.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.